This is black cherry, one of my favorite medicinal trees. You can make an infusion with it that was traditionally used for coughs and colds, and because the bark is a medicinal component, it can be found and gathered even in the dead of winter, which is often when it's needed the most. And that's not the only one. There are 4 additional common trees with medicinal bark that I want to tell you about. I have spent weeks and many hours digging through historical text, scouting for these trees, and conducting my own experiments, so I'm very excited to share with you everything that I've discovered. I'll show you their traditional uses, how to easily identify them without their leaves, proper harvesting technique, and what the preparations actually taste like. It's really bitter. My name is Jesse, you're watching Feral Foraging, and this is 5 common medicinal trees that you should know in the winter. To begin, I would like to define what I mean when I say a medicinal tree. You see, I'm not an herbalist and I don't claim to be. I'm also not claiming that any of these trees will treat or cure anything. The information here is educational only. I call them medicinal trees because I was able to find multiple historical sources which describe their traditional uses. I do my best to list known contraindications either in the video or in the description, but it's always best to do your own research for your own situation. And it never hurts to consult a medical professional as well. So with all that out of the way, let's start with the first tree, slippery elm. When we're talking about harvesting bark for medicine, what we really mean is the inner bark. What we're looking at here on the outside is the periderm, and within that is the inner bark, sometimes also called the active phloem. That is the part that's going to contain the chemicals that are responsible for the medicinal effects that we are after. The inner bark of slippery elm readily produces a sweet and gelatinous liquid when placed in water. That's where it gets its name. Even just chewing on the end of a twig, you'll start to feel a little bit of the slippery texture that's produced by the mucilaginous compounds in the tree. Because of this, it was often used in cases of sore throat, and it really does provide a nice relief for this. Additionally, it was used to soothe gastrointestinal distress and for respiratory conditions. Mature slippery elm trees have bark with long intersecting ridges, but even when the tree is very young, those ridges will develop to be soft and corky. You can kind of press them. The buds are very distinctive. They are somewhat blunt, with dark brown, almost black bud scales, usually accompanied by orange-brown fuzzy hairs towards the top. The twigs are rough and hairy as well. Sometimes I find it easier to spot slippery elm by the numerous dark brown buds that are large enough to be seen even high up in the branches. If you take a cross-section of the outer bark, it will be relatively uniform in color, a dark orange-brown, compared to American elm, which has distinct coloration zones almost like an Oreo. There's also Siberian elm, Ulmus pumila, which is a weedy and invasive tree that also makes a mucilaginous tea. So if you have this one in your area, definitely use it first. It tends to have bark with deeper, more defined ridges, twigs that are smooth, and buds that are more blunt. You'll see a lot of claims that slippery elm is endangered or at risk due to overharvesting or Dutch elm disease, but there isn't a lot of literature on this subject. Nonetheless, in my area, the tree is fairly common, and I imagine the same is true for a lot of others like you as well. I do want to emphasize again, if you have the invasive species around, and you likely do, as it's an invasive species, then it only makes sense to harvest from it first before trying to use slippery elm at all. But this does bring up a good point, which is the sustainability of harvesting bark for medicine. When we're gathering the inner bark, we'll be interacting with what essentially amounts to the veins of the tree. If we were to harvest all the way around the tree, then we would girdle it, cutting off its supply of nutrients and effectively killing it. For this reason, you'll often see a lot of blogs stating that there is no sustainable way to harvest the bark, which I would argue isn't exactly true. First, when we harvest the inner bark from a tree, we want to take from a vertical slice. This minimizes the impact on the tree. I cut away the outer periderm until I reach the inner bark. Then I use my knife to cut into the fleshy portion to get a slice that's roughly an inch in width. From here, I'm able to peel it up. A healthy tree should be able to recover from this within a few seasons. But also, for several of the species in this video, I actually didn't harvest from the main trunk at all, but rather from a branch, which isn't vital to the survival of the tree. Additionally, I did tests with the twigs of some trees like wild cherry and slippery elm. The product wasn't quite as good as what I got from the true inner bark, but it was definitely comparable. Gathering large quantities is absolutely much easier if you're taking them from the main trunk. The best case is to harvest from a tree that needs to be removed anyway, like 2 young trees growing in a closed canopy forest. Remember, there are many situations where it's actually beneficial to the ecosystem to remove trees, and harvesting the bark for medicine just makes that even more of a win-win. With that, let's move on to the next one, and it's a tree that I think you may have heard of. This is black willow. When I say bark medicine, likely one of the first trees that comes to mind is willow. It almost sounds natural to say, willow bark. When we're talking about the uses of willow, many will first think of pain. Willow contains some amount of salicin, a chemical that converts to salicylic acid in the body. Salicylic acid is similar, but not exactly the same as the active ingredient in aspirin, acetyl salicylic acid. But one of the metabolites of aspirin is actually salicylic acid too. With that in mind, if you are allergic to aspirin, you are likely allergic to willow as well. Further, children, those who are pregnant or on blood thinners should avoid willow. The amount of salicin in willow varies dramatically between species, and when we investigate the historical uses of black willow specifically, explicit mentions of alleviating pain aren't quite as common. Instead, the most consistent use that I found was as a fever reducer and for stomach troubles. I've been experimenting with the effects of black willow on myself, so I'll be reporting more on that in the future. The tea from the bark is bitter, to say the least. Smelling it, it honestly smells pretty nice, rather pleasant, but I feel like it's fooling me. I think that this is about to be really bitter. Let's find out. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And while we're here, I want to tell you guys about what I'm doing to make herbal preparations with the bark. And it's very simple. All I'm doing is taking about a handful, maybe 2, and I put it in a pot. Then I'll add water about double to triple the volume. I'll bring it up to anywhere between a simmer and a boil, and I'll leave it there for at least 10 minutes. After that, I strain it out and I have my tea. Sometimes if it's really bitter, like you just saw with the black willow, I'll add some honey to make it taste better. And that's all that there is to it. You don't need to worry so much about tinctures and solvents and ratios and so on, right? Don't fall into the mistake that I did and let the perfect be the enemy of the good. This method works great and it's what I recommend for you too. With that, it's time to learn how to identify the tree. Black willow forms cracks in the bark very early in age, which develop into large vertical strips. The long and flexible twigs can be spotted from afar with their vibrant orange-brown color. Weeping willow is a tree that a lot of people have in mind when they think of willows, with its long hanging twigs. But black willow will usually have twigs that are more upright in the branches. The buds of black willow have a single bud scale that protects the immature leaf on the inside, so they will look uniform in texture on the outside. They are pointed and actually a little bit sharp if you run your fingers over them. The color of the buds is usually a little bit more red towards the tips. You can see a leaf scar encircling the buds with 3 prominent bundle scars within them. And by the way, if any of these characteristics like leaf scar or bundle scar are unfamiliar to you, don't worry, because I've got a free class that's going to go through all of them step by step in order of importance. I'll make sure to link it at the end of this video so that you can watch it after. Next is Sweetgum. This is perhaps one of the more notorious of the trees on this list. If you don't know it by its name, you probably know it by the spiky seed balls that people hate because they get all over their yards. We'll talk about the purported uses of the gumballs in a second. Identifying sweetgum is very easy. The bark, when mature, is gray and develops long ridges that form into an interlocking pattern. If there are cuts or breaks in the bark, they will often ooze a resinous sap. But it's the twigs and buds that to me are the biggest giveaway. The buds are green to brown with many overlapping bud scales that are exceedingly shiny. And if you look closely, you can see that there are tiny hairs along the edges. They sit atop oval leaf scars that have 3 prominent bundle scars within them. The twigs and branchlets often have corky wings coming from them, and of course the brown gumballs can be usually found beneath the tree or even clinging to the branches far into the winter. And listen, I know that I'm throwing a lot of details at you guys, but don't worry, I've got you covered. I created these downloadable winter profiles for all the trees that we mentioned in this video with all of the details covered. You can print them out and laminate them like I have here. You can also put them on your phone and take them out with you anywhere in the woods. Oh, and here's another one that I have for wild fruit trees, a little bit of foreshadowing for a video that is to come. You can get all of these right now with a 7-day free trial on my Patreon. The link is in the description. Now let's get back to the trees. In the historical context, Sweetgum gives us a highly valued medicine used for coughs and colds. It was also used to provide relief for stomach complaints, especially in cases like diarrhea. Additionally, it was used externally on wounds and sores. But let's talk about those gumballs. Modern herbalists will try to tell you that they can be used to make DIY Tamiflu from the shikimic acid that is in the infertile seeds, which is the chemical starting material to make oseltamivir phosphate, aka Tamiflu. What they are claiming is the equivalent of saying that you could slice vegetables with a block of steel, right? Because it's the starting material for an actual knife. All right, I just need a couple thin slices of this potato for some French fries. You know, I don't have a knife, but I do have this block of steel. This is my shikimic acid, and I'm pretty sure it'll just get the job done. Here we go, thin slices. It's not working. But don't take my word for it though. We can look to the account of renowned Alabama herbalist Tommy Bass, who stated that the best part of Sweetgum is the inner bark, with no mentions of the seeds at all, and you aren't going to find it anywhere else either. And this fits perfectly into our exploration here of bark medicine. You can find more info on this whole myth in an article that my wife and I wrote, which is on my website. Sweetgum inner bark was often used in combination with the next tree, black cherry. This one to me is one of the more iconic representatives of trees with medicinal barks. It is well known as a cough and cold medicine and, if prepared correctly, can be used to make a syrup that has a beautiful red color and delicious cherry flavor. One of the more easily recognizable features of black cherry is the horizontal lenticels that are present almost all the way through the life of the tree. When it's young, the bark is very smooth. As the tree ages, the bark splits and forms into large plates on the outside until finally developing a scaly appearance at maturity. That's what you see here. Only when it's most mature are when the horizontal lenticels are a little bit harder to see. Black cherry has small, alternating, shiny brown-red buds with true terminal buds. The twigs are also reddish-brown, sometimes with a lighter gray coating on the exterior. If you scratch the twigs or the young bark, they will release a pungent, bitter almond aroma that further clues you to its identity. Black cherry bark does contain some amount of cyanogenic glycosides. They react with enzymes in the plant tissues that release hydrogen cyanide and benzaldehyde. It's the benzaldehyde that gives us the nice cherry flavor. The amount of cyanide produced is likely small, but you just need to heat your infusion liquid to at least 78 degrees Fahrenheit to reach the boiling point of cyanide where it will evaporate off. Some say that it's the small amount of cyanide responsible for the effect of suppressing coughs, but I haven't found any compelling information to believe that this is true. Overall, I'm not worried about the small amount of cyanide that's in wild cherry, and for context, you should know that there are common fruits from the grocery store like flaxseed or almonds that contain small amounts of cyanide as well. It's really not an issue. However, the chemical in the next tree might be of greater concern. Sassafras is an iconic medicinal tree that was once used as the principal ingredient in root beer. Now, there is a very important warning that I need to give you about sassafras. It contains relatively large amounts of a chemical called safrole, which is the main component that gives it its characteristic flavor. From my research, I found that safrole is a known carcinogen. There may be some nuance to the actual amounts in humans that would constitute a toxic dose. As you're about to see, I felt comfortable enough consuming a small amount of sassafras bark tea for the video, but I just want you to have the information. I'm doing a deeper dive on the subject, and for now, consume at your own risk. It's a shame too, because sassafras tea is delicious. It looks beautiful, it smells amazing. Let's try it. Wow. And it tastes wonderful. It's a shame about the potential dangers of safrole because I really could drink this every day. It's so good. Sassafras has bark with long intersecting ridges, often with horizontal breaks. If you scratch away a layer of the outer bark, then it will reveal a vibrant orange-red color on the inside. The tree has large and prominent terminal buds with overlapping bud scales, but much smaller lateral buds on the sides. The twigs are usually green and very smooth, and if you cut them, they emit a strong but pleasant and somewhat sweet aroma, likely due to the safrole. There are many documented uses for sassafras, both internal and external. Internally, it was taken for parasites, fevers, chills, and various venereal diseases. Externally, it was used as an antiseptic for cuts and sores and as an eye wash. So like I said before, if you are really interested in building your confidence in identifying and recognizing trees in the wintertime, whether they are medicinal trees like we saw in this video, or maybe even wild fruit trees, then I think my introduction to Winter Tree ID class is exactly what you need. It should have popped up right next to me, so you can click it to check it out, and I really hope to see you there.